Good evening. I'd like to call the regularly scheduled board meeting of the Waterloo Schools Board of Education to order and ask that you join me in a moment of silence. Thank you, and will you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excuse me, and then we'll do our mission statement. And I have to get back to it, which is that the Waterloo Schools community commits to a comprehensive system of education and support to assure that each and every student will graduate prepared for college, career, and citizenship, as evidenced by continuing education, pursuing a career path, and contributing to a community. So the first item on our agenda then is information from individuals and delegations, and I would ask our board secretary, Pam Arndorfer, if we have any comments this evening.
No comments were received.
Okay, thank you. Then the next item on our agenda is item A, and this is a T-Mobile grant. And the recommendation here, I'm going to go ahead and get the motion on the table while Matt O'Brien comes forward. And that is that the Board of Education accept with gratitude the donation of 200 hotspots with cellular internet service for 5 years from T-Mobile.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Stacie. And a second by Jesse. And discussion. Matt, I can turn it over to you for a little bit more explanation. Thanks.
Absolutely, yeah. So the board has previously made it a priority that we bridge the digital divide as much as we can, knowing that that's a problem every year, but particularly obviously a problem this year with our mixture of hybrid and remote learning. So one of the concerns that we've had is the sustainability of that moving forward as well. So we know that this is an exceptional year for those needs, but we also know that in subsequent years, that doesn't necessarily mean that digital divide is going away, and that's still going to be important moving forward. So this year we've been able to pay for internet access for students who have not had internet service through special funds that we've received, such as gear funds or some other special funding sources. So this T-Mobile grant, we're very thankful for, because this will not only allow us to serve students' needs for this year, but will also be a big step forward into sustainability into subsequent years, because it actually is for 5 years of internet service. So we're excited to recommend that the board accept this donation from T-Mobile for 200 lines of service.
Excellent. And board, do you have questions for Matt?
Are these seamless with the rest of the hotspots?
Yeah, so actually all of the hotspots we configure so that they just work instantly with our Chromebooks and iPads, and we've gotten this same type of hotspot before. We actually have some paid contracts with T-Mobile as well, so they'll be the same model of hotspot that we've worked with in the past with some of our other contracts.
Okay, and about how many hotspots or connection points is the district currently funding with, through grants or whatever? But
sure.
Overall,
So the last I polled, which was last week, we were at serving 982 households. So of that, 858 were hotspots and 124 were with MediaCom.
Wow.
Out of how many do we have?
So somewhere in the 7,000 neighborhoods. That sound right? Yeah, Dr. Linneman says that's right. So another perspective, 1,832 students, and we have just over 10,000 students.
I assume they may be serving multiple students, right?
Correct. Yeah, we only issue one service per household, so that's why the number's higher. So 982 households equates to serving 1,832 for students. Yep.
So
And
do
now I see on here, Matt, that it says we have the option of upgrading. Would there ever be a need for that, or?
Yeah, so this year I think there will be a need, and what we're planning on doing this year is upgrading some, but not all of those this year, which is still a huge step forward. Just for those watching at home, what Ms. Flynn is referring to is there's an option we can upgrade service from basically a fixed bandwidth amount to an unlimited amount for $15 a month, which if anyone's taken out a cell phone plan, they know $15 a month is still a heck of a deal for unlimited bandwidth. So we're still thankful for that opportunity, and we're planning right now at least to start off by splitting those. So we'll send approximately probably half of those will be for elementary households that maybe just have 1 or 2 elementary students. They don't take their Chromebooks home on normal circumstances, so that's more than enough bandwidth for them. We'll use the others for households that have multiple students or secondary students that are actually taking their Chromebooks home. And the reason why I say this year we probably have some exceptional needs is just because of the type of remote learning we're doing. You know, we want to be prepared for if we have to go, or if we choose to go with a hybrid option, which involves more remote learning again. Also, certainly for virtual learning, for those students that are virtual learning, we want to make sure they have unlimited bandwidth. Under a normal, if I can use that in quotation marks here, the 100 gigabits of data is more than enough under normal circumstances for a student to do, you know, typical some streaming, Google Classroom, submitting assignments, that type of thing. But this is obviously an atypical year, so we'll kind of split that. But the nice thing is it's not a contract, so we can move some of those back and forth, as opposed to most other providers. You know, when we're signing contracts, it's okay, 12 months of service that we're committed to, or with this, you know, even with us doing the half and half split, we'll be able to bring some of those back to the, you know, the free or the grant free plan over the summer, and not spend that money when we don't have to.
So about how many students or how many households do not have service at all for whatever reason?
Yes, isn't that the $1 million question? So I'll answer that by letting you know that we really tried to be proactive this year in making sure all of our families' needs were fulfilled, and we've been working the entire school year on trying to do that, and pretty much fulfilled needs the same day that we got the request via the school through us. When we actually, it seemed like when we finally went virtual, finally, I don't mean to use that word with baggage, but when we actually went virtual, a fire was lit in some cases because lots of needs ended up surfacing, even though we had already been really pushing to have those needs determined ahead of time. So we fulfilled all of our needs, all of our requests probably. So Monday, we started virtual on a Monday, and we were able to fulfill all of the requests that we were still receiving on the first day of virtual school. They were still coming in. They came in hot and heavy the week before, and they were still coming in that Monday of virtual. Starting on Tuesdays, when we depleted our on-hand supply of hotspots, and knowing this grant was coming, we were kind of waiting, holding off for that. So this is going to backfill some of those needs that we received those requests since then, which was a couple of dozen requests that we received thus far. But I will tell you that they continue, like we continue to get a trickle of requests even now that we're under, you know, typical learning, in-person learning. We still continue to learn about requests pretty much on a daily basis. So, and some of that is, you know, a new student moves to the district or things of that nature, and some of it is a family moved, or some of it is, hey, they used to be able to afford internet, and unfortunately mom or dad lost a job or something along those lines, and they had, you know, whatever internet service disconnected on them. So I'm not trying to say that, you know, this was all due to folks not being proactive. Some of it is just circumstances change, and, you know, that's to be expected this year.
Thanks for I had sent you a bunch of questions, so thank you
Yeah.
for those. There were, obviously, I'll have a couple others.
Sure.
So if I'm understanding it, what we've used so far this year, the ones that we got with the gear funds, or that we had before, right? That's what's out there.
Yeah, so the 982 households and the 1832 students that I mentioned, those are students that we started serving either last year, because we started this effort last year in March
Right.
during the first closure, or this year through our kind of renewed efforts.
So does the grant then, is this year one?
This is year one, yeah. So year one starts basically now, in November, December timeframe when we were offered the grant.
Are we switching out then? Or are we only giving out the extras? So we were given, how many came with us? I'm sorry.
So the grant's for 200 hotspots.
200.
Yep.
So we're giving all of those out as the need comes in, right? Like you're keeping them
So
until, are you switching ones out for people who, ones we were paying for?
we're
before?
going to swap out a small chunk of those, but most will go towards existing needs. The small chunk that we're swapping out are actually, I mentioned that we fulfilled all the requests we got through that first Monday of virtual. Some of those requests we had some old Verizon hotspots that the only way we could activate them was under a more expensive plan,
Okay.
which we want to basically get off of that because it's a month-to-month plan.
Right.
So those, I think 40 some or so, we're going to end up swapping out, and then the rest will be for students that we haven't been serving yet.
Okay. And so then going forward, are you anticipating that you're going to need more than 200 next year? So do we earmark the ones that we already have this year? Do we keep the plan going for next year? Or can you decide that when the year starts?
So the 200 is for free service. We
Right.
can opt to do the $15 unlimited, basically for whatever coverage that we want. We're really at this time only
Right.
planning on doing that for this year, so next year it would all revert to those 200 lines of free service. In terms of what we're actually going to do for next year, we're still having conversations around what that looks like.
Right.
Obviously, there's a lot of variables, so it's a little soon to make those final decisions, but we were trying to move forward on looking at some ways that we could sustain bridging that digital divide, which is why we went for this grant. I will say that in the conversations, so the grant consisted of an application, and then I had to do an interview with T-Mobile, and in that interview, when I spoke with them, it seemed like they were potentially willing to look at an expansion of the number of lines that they gave us down the road as
Okay.
needs would change. Obviously, they don't want to have just capacity sitting on a shelf, and we don't want that either. So they allotted us 200 to start with, and then they seemed open to that conversation for next year as well. So that's not to say that they're going to give us 10,000 or anything along those
Right.
lines, but that's a conversation that we'll be able to have moving forward with them. And then obviously, like I said as well, we'll have to have conversations on how much the district wants to continue or needs to continue to look at subsidizing internet costs for our families.
Just one more. You had asked, thank you for the information about the MediaCom ones as well. Are those more expensive than the hotspots?
So the MediaCom service is actually a little cheaper.
It is,
But
okay.
the problem, I don't want to say problem because it's obviously we're appreciative of all of the vendors that we've
Right.
worked with, and MediaCom and several cell providers actually have really come through with services offering them to school districts at a substantial discount compared to what they normally would, MediaCom being one of those. But MediaCom versus a cell provider, we have a very mobile population,
Yeah.
and that's been a challenge for us is if a family moves from one location to another, either getting that service swapped to their new address, or even whether or not that service is actually serviceable at that new
Right.
address. That's been another challenge as well, because there's only just MediaCom, CenturyLink, either
Yeah.
one only has infrastructure in certain areas. So that's why we relied much more on hotspots this year, which is consistent with what we've heard from other districts as well. I'll say districts with even maybe a little less mobile of a population than we have really more heavily relied on hotspots, just because it works much better, that it can follow the student, almost anywhere, as opposed to being fixed to just their one address. That way, if they're off to grandma's for the weekend or anything along those lines, then that hotspot can travel with them as well.
No, And that's great. I was just asking in case the MediaCom was more, if you, what we're going to look towards replacing that
Sure.
with hotspots. But if
Sure.
if MediaCom works for people, then that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
You bet.
Matt.
Just-
And congratulations on getting this. This is amazing for
Thanks.
us. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we're excited.
I mean, really, it came up to $500,000 worth, and
Yeah.
that's
Which is
that's
the
crazy.
Which is I will say that's the retail costs, and
But
you know,
still,
retail
yeah.
costs are just like the retail sticker. You probably don't necessarily pay, 50% off. However, it's still
I like
still
to
is a
look at those.
substantial,
Yeah.
so you know, in the six figures of value per year.
When
for
you
sure,
get a
sure.
deal,
So-
you always want to compare it to what the manufacturer's suggested retail price was.
exactly.
right?
Yeah. What percent off
So-
did I get?
So we deploy down through kindergarten,
We do, yes.
not preschool.
Correct. Yes, which is consistent with one-to-one. We're one-to-one down to kindergarten.
Just for clarification, when we say next year, are we referencing school year or
Sorry.
calendar year?
Yes, that's a good clarification. We're talking school year.
Okay.
I thought the same thing.
Yep.
And that it's December, we got to get that clear,
Yeah,
because next
some
year.
of us in education were so used to just year and fiscal year and school year being synonymous that I
Right.
appreciate you allowing me to clarify.
How many FTEs does it take in your department to administer this whole remote?
I think the
Well, that's a loaded
how
question.
many would you like it to take versus how many you did it with? That's
Yeah, we have what, I think 16, 17 staff. I should really know that number off the top of my head, and I don't. But 16 or 17, I'd have to start counting in a second, somewhere in there. Which is just the technology operations portion of it. Obviously, there's school support staff that have been involved with these projects as well. For example, the school's teacher librarians or tech integrationists, you know, kind of formerly known as a media specialist. They're heavily involved in just kind of the device check-in or check-out, or at our secondary levels helping determine internet needs, that type of thing. So
What's your number one problem?
what's our number one problem with remote learning, or just in general what keeps me up at night? Because those might be two different answers.
Either one.
I would say the number one problem that we run into with remote learning is really consistent with if you ask most school districts or parents doing remote learning. And obviously there's maybe a list of problems, but specifically from the tech perspective, technology just isn't perfect, right? So it's just a challenge to troubleshoot something remotely, particularly at a student's house. So I'll even just give a hotspot as an example. You know, if a family may call our help desk, I'm just generalizing with some of the calls that we've had, and they're having problems connecting to their classroom. You know, we use Google Meet for that classroom. Well, the problem may be the device itself. It may be their internet access. If we're providing their internet access, it may be one of the issues with hotspots is, I'll give you an example. I know our help desk has spent calls troubleshooting with folks, and you know, they're trying to use a hotspot, you know, in a basement maybe where there's not necessarily signal. So then we walk them through, okay, let's try and put it closer to a window to see if you can get a stronger signal strength, you know, those type of things. So I think to sum it up, I would say technology just isn't perfect, and there's a lot more variables at home than there is on our network. There's still a lot of variables here, but there's even more when you're serving a diverse in terms of the tech they're using and the internet they're using, student body at home.
How's your traceability on these devices? I mean, do you monitor ones that are not being used and maybe go and recollect those?
Yeah, so
Periodically, if you're seeing like, okay, that thing it's not been activated in, 2 months.
right. I will tell you, at the beginning of the school year, we were kind of in survival mode, so we weren't able to do a whole lot of proactive things like that. We've started looking at a few of those things. And quite honestly, sometimes some of that will come through the school as well, because the school may realize that Johnny hasn't, if Johnny's a virtual student and maybe he hasn't been active for a while, we can enter into a dialogue with the school, and the school will work to find some solutions of that as well. So we can look at some of those pieces with the actual hotspot utilization. We can also obviously look at just the students' attendance and things of that nature as well.
Well, Matt,
pig-
be sure.
Oh, sorry. Piggybacking on that, though, I was wondering, can we see the usage, like your cell phone bill, you see exactly like when you may have been on, but like if there's certain times that are more active, less active, overnight, those types of things, or do
Yeah.
we have that capability?
So generally we actually have contracts with 4 different providers, 3 cell providers, and with Mediacom as well. So each reports things a little differently. Generally, like for example, the cell reports will just show us the total bandwidth they've used for that billing period. So it's not like they're making calls, you're just seeing that they've used X amount of bandwidth. However, the hotspots are actually tied down to work seamlessly with our devices, like I said earlier, and they're actually in that way tied to only work with our devices, so only our Chromebooks and iPads. So then we actually have other reporting tools that we can use because, for example, we have a software called GoGuardian, which does our internet filtering and things of that nature on our Chromebooks, which also has some reporting that would allow us to see, not only the website's access, but the times that they were accessed, the categories, things of that nature as well, down to the student level if we need to. Again, we don't necessarily proactively drill down into what each student is doing. Obviously, we don't necessarily have time for things of that nature, but we can definitely look at, some patterns, and then also anytime that there's a potential issue, we can certainly drill in and see what a student's been up to if a school is troubleshooting an issue with that student.
Okay, and then just my last question is security-wise, when we're using, all these different hotspots, all these different providers, we're obviously increasing our risk for hacks, and how have we withstood this so far?
So, when Mr. Schmitt asked the question of what my biggest problem is, and I said, well, it depends on whether you're talking about what keeps me up at night versus remote learning, and I answered remote learning. Security is absolutely what's going to be my answer for what keeps me up at night, for sure. And so I'll speak general. IT folks are almost a little superstitious, so I almost want to knock on wood that so far things have been okay, because that honestly has not necessarily been the pattern. Just this last week, the Department of Homeland Security actually issued an alert on which obviously we had all been following, but it's kind of adds that much more realism or credence if the Department of Homeland Security sends out an alert about the increase in attacks aimed at school districts because of an increase in remote learning. And it is very much a problem and a concern. What I will say is, particularly from our student device perspective, I feel more comfortable having Chromebooks at home than I do Windows computers traveling back and forth, just because of the way that they're structured and the way security is kind of compartmentalized on the Chromebooks. So in that regard, our concern is still our staff members who take Windows computers home. It's probably a little bit of a higher risk. Most of our students are really just accessing, for the most part, cloud-based things or, our public-facing websites. So the risk there is actually a little lower, quite honestly, than a lot of our staff members if they're taking, which most of them do, their district laptop home and using those at home. But absolutely, that all keeps anyone who works in IT. That's absolutely an ongoing concern for sure.
Well, that guy that got fired, the cyber alert guy, maybe we can hire him. He's a project.
Christopher Krebs, yes. Ironically, he was the Department of Homeland Security that I mentioned, that alert, that was underneath that specific department that sent it out was under him. But.
Instilling awesome confidence. There you go.
Matt, and just because you're mentioning that, one of the other things too that we will have to work on as a district administration and also as the board is just when you asked about like what are some of the things, I would just also mention too, we're really monitoring the cost of lost hotspots, lost Chromebooks, lost textbooks, because when we give out all of these things, they, you know, I know that we all
Sometimes they
think
don't come
that
back.
they all come back, but they do not. And so we're looking at that even from last summer, the MediaCom, it's, you know, you can hook up there, but you still have to add a modem, is that what it, what was,
Correct,
a
cable
modem?
modem, yeah.
So we would drop that off, and sometimes we didn't get that back, and we're on, you know, the school contracts of that, these are our items, and so we are really tracking that, but there is, you know, unfortunately, last spring, we did lose some textbooks from seniors who you just don't get everything back.
Yep.
And so there is a certain amount that we consider cost of doing business, but there's also, you know, we don't just assume that, well, it didn't come back. We try very hard to get those back. And so we're already thinking about the immense amount of technology that we have out in homes right now, that just trying to figure out exactly how we will get that back. So it's just one other thing for you to think about as we go. So, good.
And do we have to pay more for more security? You know, like at home I have McAfee or whatever, you know, but I mean, do we have to pay more because we're using lots more carriers and providers?
I wouldn't necessarily say that, but just to give you an example to maybe piggyback, to tie your two statements together with our Chromebooks, we've always, with every Chromebook we buy what's called a Chrome management license, and that allows us to do some remote management, such as if the Chromebook isn't returned to us when it's supposed to be, then we can basically freeze it out so that no one is able to, it basically effectively isn't usable. And if, you know, even someone knows what they're doing and wipes it, it's called power washing within a Chromebook, then it re-enrolls as soon as it hits the internet, and then it basically, again, locks them out from using it, that type of thing. So those are some strategies that we've always felt have been important.
And I think, Jane, your comment was, my point on traceability was just right there on
Yep.
making sure that, you know, and if we already have equipment out that's not being used, you know, if we can get back in our
Yeah.
possession now,
Saves.
then, you know, maybe that student was virtual and now they're in class, but they have one checked out, well, maybe we can, you know, work early on it rather than later.
Absolutely. I will say sometimes it's a challenge just because sometimes they go from being our student to all of a sudden, you know, one day and they're active on Monday, and then Tuesday all of a sudden they've literally driven and moved away type of thing. So those are some of the challenging ones that we've dealt with, but absolutely we try to be proactive when we can.
Well, thanks, Matt. We really appreciate all your efforts and applying for this. And I don't know who to thank at T-Mobile, but I know it's a grant, but I hope we can find the right people, and please give them our thanks.
I will absolutely. I have a couple contacts there, so I absolutely
Excellent.
pass on the board's
Be sure to
thanks.
do that. Okay, thank you. All right, I guess we have to vote on this now. So all those in favor of approving this T-Mobile grant, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, same sign. Chair votes aye. Motion carried. Thanks again, Matt. We appreciate it.
You bet.
The next item on our agenda then is Exhibit B, and this is just for information only. And I will probably ask Kingsley Botchway to come forward and answer any questions that we might have about it. But it's not really a motion, it's just the background information that the Waterloo School District has offered a special substitute rate during some high times of filling vacancies. And so, Kingsley, do you want me to just read this piece, or do you want to? I know you can. Or do you want me to? I will happily read it, but I thought maybe you might want to add your own special sauce.
I'll add some brief special sauce.
There you go.
You know, it's just we basically, based on the conversation Michael and I had from the auditors, we just wanted to make sure that when we're spending certain amounts of money that may be different than what we normally do, just that information come to the board as information only. We're doing things that would normally be what we could do, but we just want to make sure the board was aware, and the auditors tied two things in particular to that. And one of them is this part where it's just a substitute special rate for, again, we did $200 per day when we were dealing with some significant issues in related to COVID absences.
Great. And then do you want to go ahead and address Exhibit C, which is also substitute authorization reimbursement? That's also for information only, and this is in regards to getting some of our substitutes authorized to teach.
Yeah, so
Correct?
we talked about this a couple of times
Yep.
before, and so this is just, again, just for your information about, we just implemented that program. And so we have a number of folks that have taken advantage of that. We're very pleased with BOEE for allowing this particular, and the governor for allowing this, just because it added some coverage that we would not have had otherwise, and it was necessary.
Can you answer how many of our employees have taken advantage of this? Approximately.
It's a great question. I would say, less than 30 employees
Okay.
have taken advantage of this. We're still getting more people to participate, and it's not just for our employees. We're also looking at community as well. And so there's other individuals of the community that are interested in participating. They don't have to be an employee with Waterloo Schools, but they
Okay.
do still have to sign that agreement.
Okay.
Kingsley, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is
Well,
it-
Pardon me. I'm sorry.
Is this substitute authorization course, is that a online course?
Yes, it's an AEA course. So normally you have to go in person, but with the COVID, it changes, so all these are online. And so we don't have our own person that does it. We're trying to look into that right now, but we go through a number of different AEAs that we pay for the class for people to take the class.
And Lyle, it's like 15 hours. It's not
Yeah.
just a 2-minute thing.
Okay.
It's a full week
Yeah.
of,
15 contact hours.
yes,
Correct.
yes. And then there's some exams, and then I have a family member who just finished doing this.
Correct.
Oh, he got it
Yep.
done?
He did do it.
Good.
He's actually at Carver tomorrow.
Good, that's
So
awesome.
I shouldn't say that out loud.
Do you, is it okay if I kind of went through this stuff?
Yep, I was
shot
gonna
at
do
you?
it too.
Go.
Yeah,
If
so-
you want to do it, do it.
A couple of quick questions that I know you'd asked beforehand is, is this going back to the substitute special pay rate? Is this a special pay rate going to continue on difficult to fill days? And yes, I mean, we feel like there's an opportunities here, not just for this year, but as we think about what our plans for in the future in order to help with subbing, we're also going to do that. How many subs took up this offer? About 20. Took this special pay rate. It was interesting because we had some percentage decline of our subs because of COVID, but they came out of the woodwork for $200 a day. And so that was a change that we noticed, and I know that times, I think Lyle has mentioned, are we paying too low? We are, again, still paying in line with everybody else. We haven't costed it out if we started offering $200 per day, but we want to be careful because that's a lot of money, and I know that our union has asked the question, if when we up that, are we going to up it for our teachers as well? And so there's always requests and asks happening at different rates. The other question on here was, how were they made aware of the incentive? We just sent an email out to all subs so they were aware. Did you help to get into those specific? Did it help to get those subs in those specific positions at those times? Absolutely. It was going to be tough at one of our buildings to have it. And again, it was interesting because we traditionally don't have subs. We did in this case, just with that pay increase. So we know money talks, for lack of a better word. And then why were those weeks so difficult? Was it just related to COVID? It was by and large related to COVID, but it was also COVID and we may have some people on leave. And so if it was just people on leave, we would be able to work it out. But with COVID as well, in some cases, one building, it was all COVID. But in some places, it was, we already have 3 teachers out and COVID made it, we needed to make this particular declaration. And this is based on percentages as well when it comes to that. It's not just Kingsley decides. It's if we get to a certain percentage and the building principal and I have had multiple conversations, we start to get uncomfortable from a coverage standpoint, then we need to have that, then we need to institute this particular thing.
So what's our regular rate?
Regular rate is 130 and 150 for long term. 130 for short term, 150 for long term.
In Kingsley, it says in return, the employee must sign an agreement with the district. How do we hold, credence to that? I know like where I work and people take the education and then they have to pay back if they leave and break the contract. So I guess what is the teeth to our contract?
That is what it says in the contract. They have to pay a certain portion back. And so we're just prorating that on the time they work. So if they do it for a year and then they decide not to ever do it again, we'd ask that they pay that money back for that portion. And we want to be flexible here. We also know that this is an opportunity for people to get in our buildings that wouldn't necessarily take an opportunity. We don't want to, depending on the situation, hold their feet to the fire in certain situations, but we do want to think about the benefit and the money that people are using from the district in order to get this benefit.
I guess I'm a little concerned about this. I would rather we do raise our standard pay, because I can see this is kind of quicksand when you start to offer like the $200 all of a sudden people are gonna say, well, let's nobody agree to go in for 130 because they're gonna offer 200 if we just hold out. You know, there's a whole lot of things here, and I'm just kind of nervous about the whole thing of saying, well, I'm concerned about my health for $130, but I reach my threshold of pain here, and at $200, I'm pretty uncomfortable with that whole and how it plays out in the future and the whole dynamics of you know how that's controlled and
Yeah.
so forth. So I guess I'd really rather look at a overall increase so that you know we have enough substitutes regardless what, and not happen to so-called bribe people at the last minute. I don't know. I just think this is fraught with future problems.
Well, and again, because it's not a report, it's just for, you know, just a one pager. You know, it isn't, I don't want you to think that it's a jump. I mean, this, in order to get for these 3 weeks that were identified here, it was hours of conversation that we had with the building principal, with Lydia, who's our substitute, our ASOP individual or facilitator. And so it seems like it's a jump as far as like Kings is making a decision, you know, next day all of a sudden happens, and it takes a lot more time, especially when we look at the numbers. I mean, I think the board knows our numbers and how low they have been and some of the concerns that have happened in some of our buildings as they were mentioned here. And so with that, we had to make those decisions based on certain set of criteria, not across the board. Sometimes you have to have some hard conversations with our principals, like, hey, you can cover it in the building. Why don't you utilize this teacher? Why don't you utilize that teacher? Will we look at it based on this data and information? Yes. Will we do it up to that level? Maybe not. I can send some more information to you about what we did for all subs. This is a constant conversation across the board. And Margaret Button actually sent an email a week ago that I had to fill out as far as the sub-related issues. And so it's not just a Eastern Iowa issue, it's an Iowa issue as well.
Well, and one of the things too that I think we have to think of this like a short-term issue, because we've had sub issues in the past. There might be a certain day that we can't, but before COVID, we had a lot more options that we could do. If we had 4 kindergarten classrooms and one was gone, we could take kids and split them up, and we could still continue to educate them. Right now, we're really reluctant to do that and to add lots of kids, because it makes it almost impossible to social distance. It also kind of messes with contact tracing. So there's a lot of issues with that. And so in these cases, it really was a matter of, can we hold school or can we not hold school? And so that, you know, that was it. But I get where you're going, Lyle, because it is a slippery slope. And we talked about that a lot, but it was kind of that it's not perfect, but it's better than canceling school, but it's better than that, you know, so I hear you.
But I'm guessing once you pay one teacher for a certain day in a certain school at 200, you have to pay all the substitutes that.
No, not
It
necessarily.
was for those particular positions we absolutely couldn't fill, so
And
it was.
just at that time, so
Correct.
it wouldn't be now.
So if I'm a substitute and I agree to go in to whatever school A, and then another position can't be filled, and you come in later, then I'm working alongside I'm $130 working alongside $200 because I agreed early.
Yeah, I think we made, I think you see what you're saying. I think we made determinations based on, you know, the situations for the hard to fill positions. We do the same thing now when it came to hard to fill positions, when we just in generally may offer some type of incentive or things along those lines. And so I get your point as far as, is it fair if I'm a 6th grade teacher at Hoover and it's hard to, it's hard to fill because of, you know, maybe the absences, and then 8th grade it's just a normal personal day. Do I feel what happens in that case? And I think, you know, our subs actually handled it really well. I mean, nobody had an issue with it. I think what I said before was that our union had an issue as far as, well, if you're jumping the pay up for them, is there more pay for us? I think that's part of the conversation that needs to happen, or at least dialogue needs to happen in relation to even moving the sub pay up as it is.
Yeah, and it really falls in the category of the grace that comes with COVID, because there's a lot of things that are not perfect. But this, we're not presenting this as a perfect model. Believe me, it was kind of one of those, we need to have school tomorrow. What are we going to do? This will make it, and that's what happens. So we're not presenting it as a perfect model. It is.
Yeah.
We actually
I'm
have
just-
a list of several things that have not been perfect during COVID. We just.
But
make it
in
happen.
reality, Kingsley, how many did this affect? How many subs got this 200 pay?
Yeah, a little bit less than 20.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
it's probably 15 people or something.
And,
so-
and really, the only thing that was interesting from a data standpoint was that there was one particular, Carver in particular has always had some trouble getting subs, and then all of a sudden they didn't with this. And it, there's a lot of reasons that we've talked about before about, the differences in getting subs in some buildings compared to other buildings. This is definitely something we're going to take a closer look at and say, if money is the only factor that would incentivize people to go to hard to fill positions, is that something we need to consider? And Jane's, spot on with, again, well, there's a lot of things happening that, again, I'm just kind of spitballing here, that are happening prior to getting to this point. Teachers stating that, hey, I don't want to go into somebody else's classroom, not allowing for class covering in that sense, wanting to make sure cross contact tracing occurs at high levels. By then, we've already sent an email out to the building saying that extracurricular activities can't continue on. We've also provided additional emails out to staff saying that you need to be paying attention to your outside activity. We've had conversations with them. I mean, that's why when I say hours, it takes a lot of time to get to this point. But we just wanted to make sure you had this information just in case there were questions that were raised.
And I appreciate it, and I understand that. My only point is, as long as we've now established proof positive that money is differential, then we ought to look at where is the base 130 or 140, wherever it is, that gives us
Yeah.
a
I agree.
sufficient supply that's sustainable.
Yeah.
That's what he's talking about, looking at hard to staff buildings. Maybe if the money is an issue, so that's why they're doing a study based on this. So I think he just wanted to present this tonight.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, you're right. Good
Yeah.
questions.
Another thing that you might look at, even long term, not short term, is do you have a variable rate factor in there where you're going to be at a certain percentage of teacher out on a given day, you kick in a higher rate because you make sure you fill the buildings don't stay, and then you just give that across the board on that given day because
So I think you get an A for being innovative.
I appreciate that. Coming from Lyle, I'm going to leave right after this. Not even listen to the rest of the meeting. I know, right? And so going back to the substitute, the last one, the substitute authorization reimbursement, to go back to your questions, yes, they have to pay back the reimbursement. Like I said, this is also open to the community. I think you've asked this question before, Stacie, around what happens when an employee
Yes.
sub for teachers leaving their own position.
Right.
They're supposed to backfill. The principal lets us know about that vacancy, and we need to backfill. Again, as I've talked about before, we want to be careful with that. I think I feel comfortable saying, hey, in certain situations, it can work. But if we have somebody moving out of that position and sub-teaching for 2 weeks, then I can't come to you and say that fidelity is happening in that level. And so,
Yeah.
but it also works in tandem with our special ed department. When Ivan and I talk about it, when it happens, it's a conversation we have. How can we swing coverage in other ways to make sure that
Okay.
we're still getting our minutes? So it's not ideal, so we don't want to use it all the time. And
Yeah.
this is an emergency situation that we utilize this process.
And thank you, I know you're gonna answer the rest of these, but to insert one in, is this something that maybe we've gone to talk to about with all of the special ed paras who are in a room, whereas when that teacher's gone, that they can just slip into that position? I mean, do you know what I'm saying? Is that something that has been specifically presented to them, that if you do this, then we don't have to get a sub that day?
Yeah, we have to be careful with that in a sense.
Well, I
because-
guess with numbers.
Well, not
that's
with
your-
numbers, more along the lines of even though they're a sub in that position, some of the specially designed instruction has to come from that teacher. And so
Right.
they are providing that, via the sub plans or whatever the case may be. And so, yeah, could they step up into that position? Yes. And no, we just don't want to do it on a regular basis.
Right, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, good question. A good question was, is this open to all employees who meet this criteria? Yes, but we want to be careful with not doing, custodians or food service and things
So
along
that's
those
no.
lines.
Okay.
No, because again, when we don't necessarily have the subs in order to do that, and we don't necessarily know that all of our custodians have that. It wasn't a request of custodians. It was more from that para or support staff
Yeah.
subgroup.
Okay,
But it was something we didn't think about could a food service employee
Well, I
that
know food
has
service
prior,
employees, yeah, with the BA, you
has
know.
prior experience that would like to do it and extend their hours after they get done serving food? Absolutely. The
Okay.
custodian one's just tricky just because of how we're cleaning now, we don't have cleaning and disinfecting. We just don't have the
Yeah.
amount of subs to help and support. So we just want to be careful with pulling them if
Okay.
they have the qualifications. Yep, I said the principals
Yep.
notify us from that, and then are we offering the sub-authorization class? Nope. Like I said, we send a list of the available classes across the different AEAs. Lydia does that, and then is there a minimum number of times they must sub to fulfill the agreement? No, not necessarily. I mean, we do want people to sub if you are. We do have a stipulation, I believe, of over 50%, but again. We also know with holidays coming up and other things, you may not necessarily meet that threshold, and so if you do it once for a year, we have a problem. So it's just more of a balance that we use.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You better sit down while you still have your star.
I know, right?
Your A. Your A. I was thinking he gave you a gold star, but okay.
For the record, I'm gonna put that on my evaluation, Lyle. So thank you.
All right, then. Well, the next item on our agenda is our annual meeting. This is the normal time in which we do our fiscal rearranging as well as the board nominations for the exec board, et cetera. So the first item here is the annual meeting financial documents. And that recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the treasurer report for June 30th, 2020, and approve the list of financial institutions as depositories with corresponding maximum amounts in Policy 7011, Depository of Funds. Thank you, Sue. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jesse. And Michael Coughlin is going to walk us through these. We are getting him on the document right now, or on the document.
Michael will need to turn his phone off.
Okay. Michael, Pam says you need to turn your phone off and just use your computer. Does that make sense? Here we go.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, much better.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Where am I?
Yep.
You see it says toggle and it's just right underneath your screen, right on the bottom side of your screen.
Yep.
And it'll pop up on the
Got it. Just a little button.
Okay, I guess I'm on live, so I'm going to cover the two documents that I'm required to present for the annual meeting. And it is the treasurer's report, which is on page 5, and it is the depository of funds renewal on page 6. On page 5 is the treasurer's report that comes out of the certified annual report, the CAR, and it goes by all the different funds that we use, starting with the general fund on the far left. And this amount is not a cash balance. It's not an authority balance. It is the fund balance. It's saying that when you recognize all of the revenues that you have, whether you've received them or not, and all the expenses that you are obligated to pay, such like the summer salaries that we write all the checks in June, but we don't hand them out till July and August. This number comes from the total revenues and the total expenditures that are obligated to the 1920 budget year. And these would be the ending balances, the ending fund balance for all of the different funds that we use. So just as you're looking across the bottom, general fund is 18.5 million and activity fund is 1.2 million, management fund 1.372, and so on as you go across. This is a short a comprehensive summary of the activity in all of the different funds, showing on the top line what balance we started with, what we had for revenues, what we had for expenditures, and what our fund balance is at the end of the year. Is there any questions on that?
On the save money, what do those numbers represent?
I'm gonna have to text him your questions because he cannot hear
Oh,
through this, so. You could put him back on the phone. But he's. Yeah. Okay, you wanna know what
I'm
save-
not hearing anything, so I am going to go on to the depository.
Michael,
the
actually,
funds,
Michael, can you hear me?
On an annual basis, we
Lyle,
name
you wanted to know
the
what the
financial
save-
institutions that we hold funds in.
What was your question?
And currently there are 3.
what do the save?
And I have
Numbers
those listed below the policy on line 6. Farmers State Bank is our main depository of our funds, that all of the funds that we have, the money that we receive and pay out, are all accounts at that bank. I'm just going to explain the 3 differences first and then go through the amounts. The Iowa School Investment Trust is a bank account. Actually, it's with West Fargo.
Yeah.
Hello? Yep, that sounds fine.
We can't hear his phone right now anyway. Yep.
Bye-bye.
Yep. He has to click mute again.
Yeah. Are those funds?
The
that are-
save dollars, it's about in the middle of the page. The save dollars are the 1 penny sales tax funds that come in from the 1 cent sales tax that is then averaged across all of the districts in the state, and divided out by so much money per pupil. So every district, based on their enrollment, is getting the same amount of money per student that every other district gets. So they level it out by accounting for it on a state level and then dividing it by the enrollment, and that's what we get annually. If you see the revenues for that, and I'm trying to read the small print, about 12,195,000 last year.
But is this cash that's not earmarked for paying back bonds?
Thank you. Perfect. Good thing I'm not in virtual school.
Is this cash, Michael, is this cash that's over and above the money that's earmarked to pay back the bonds?
currently that balance is over and above the money that is earmarked to pay the bonds. That money is put into the debt service fund, which is 3 columns over. That's money we're holding in those accounts to make the payments, and money comes out of the save funds on a monthly basis. We get over $1 million, about $1 million a month, and they take out about 800 to 900,000 that then go into that debt service account to pay the bond. So the balance, the 14 million that's in there right now, at the end of June 20, is not. That's balance above what we've already set aside to pay the bonds.
Okay.
So that's available funds.
Okay. Thank you.
Sounds good. Any other questions? I can bring the phone to you.
Tom now needs to go back to depository of funds.
Okay, now you can go back to depository of funds.
Okay. Going back to that policy, we have the 3 bank accounts, Farmer State Bank, and I was talking about the investment trust that is currently run through Wells Fargo Bank, but that is a state fund that the Department of Education uses to funnel or to provide to all of the school districts one place where they release all the state payments, rather than the State Department themselves trying to manage the payments to bank accounts for every school district individually. They deposit it into the Joint Investment Trust, and then the Joint Investment Trust makes arrangements with all of the local banks that the schools have across the state. This account normally doesn't hold a lot of money in it for very long. The state aid payments come out, and in our case, we can get a little better interest rate with our local bank than what the investment trust offers. So we take the money in and out of there quickly. If another district does not have that kind of an arrangement, they can leave money in the investment account just to collect interest, because that's the best rate they can get. So it is used a little bit different by different schools, but in our case, most of that money comes in and goes out within just a couple of days. But we do get up to over 15, around 15 or a little over that $1 million capability of coming in at any one time. That's why the 20 million is named for that. The UMB Bank is a debt service bank. When I talked about Fund 40, the debt service account that $18 million are in on that treasurer's report, that is all money that is held at UMB just to make bond payments. And I did raise that a little bit because of what is potential capacity need if we have another project that when that's ready to go and be financed, and how we deal with the money that flows through a bond sale and then into a payment schedule. So I did up that a little bit from last year. It is a little conservative, but it is done in light of saying this is a possibility of something that we just don't know quite yet, but this will get us through this fiscal year. Is there any questions on those?
Turn your microphone on too, so that.
Alex Truitt. Michael, this is Sue, and I was just wondering through the UMB bank, is there any interest paid on that even though, you said it is short-term for bond payment? Is there at least some type of interest paid on that account?
The UMB bank does have a positive rate of interest for that. Yes, they do hold it, but they also pay interest on it. And the biggest factor in there is the QSCB bond that we make annual payments of $1.1 million, and it sits in that account until the whole debt is due, the whole bond is matured. So as it sits there, it is making interest that helps make part of the most of the principal payment that the bond requires. So we are, if you remember discussions we've had in the past, that the QSCB bond has been a much better arrangement for us, because when we made the principal payments, they really sat in a investment account and helped offset most of the interest cost on the bond. So it's been a very positive cash flow issue for the district. It was one of the stimulus opportunities that came out of the Obama administration at the time, and we were in a place to take advantage of that. So we have borrowed about $16 million, and our rate of interest is going to be very low by the time we get done earning the interest on the principal payments that have been sitting there since the beginning. So yes, they do pay interest, and yes, it is an advantage to us, especially in that situation.
Thank you. No more questions, it looks like.
Tell him thanks.
Ready, Teresa? Nope, we're good, thank you.
All right, so, and Michael will be back with us here at the end of the meeting for other things, but then all those in favor of approving the financial documents, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, same sign. Chair votes aye, motion carried. This takes us to Exhibit E, and we're just going to take just a second here to get Michael reconnected. Are we going to call him back? Okay. Michael, are you okay if we just keep you on this phone? Do you want to put him back on this one though until, he's on mute. He's done with his. Okay. Okay. So, pardon us, technology's great until we need to fix ourselves. So it's fine. It's okay. It's stand up, sit down. It's all right. Yep, exactly. It's all right. It's the way it needs to be. So, then we can move on to Exhibit E. If Board Secretary, Madam, are you ready? Okay. So this is the second part of our annual meeting, and this is the election of officers. And as I alluded to, we have not had an actual election in November of any new board members, but it is by law every year annually we have to reorganize our board. So we do those financial things, and then we elect a president and a vice chair. So with that, I will turn it over to Pam.
And I get to do this part of the meeting. So as Shanley said, we do need to elect a president and vice president. So I will open nominations for president of the board.
Shanley.
Okay, and I will entertain a motion to close those nominations.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, and all those in favor of closing the nominations, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, Shanley has been nominated as president, so all those in favor of electing Shanley McNally as president of the board, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. I guess I can vote for myself,
Yes,
can't
you
I?
can. And opposed? Thank you. Shanley has been elected president of the board for this
Okay.
next year.
I don't have to get up out of my chair.
And then secondly, we will open nominations for the office of vice president of the board.
Sue.
Is that Stacie?
Sue.
Okay, okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Yes, it's out of Stacey's mouth, yes. Okay. So I will entertain a motion to close nominations for the office of vice president.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. So Sue Flynn has been nominated as vice president of the board. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And Sue Flynn has also been elected as vice president of the board. So I will ask you both to stand, and I will stand as well, and raise your right hand. And we will administer the oath of office. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and that you will faithfully and impartially, to the best of your ability, discharge the duties of the office of President and Vice President of the Board of Education in the Waterloo Community School District as now or hereafter required by law?
I will. I do.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you. I didn't know if it was do or will. I said them both, so. All right. Thank you all. Then we can move on to item F, and this is, again, I will leave this with Madam Secretary Pam Arndorfer. This is the reorganization of the board. This is our, I don't even know how to, this is just the signatures, correct? Do you want me to go ahead and put the whole motion out? Okay, so the recommended motion is that the president of the Board of Education of the Waterloo Community School District, Shanley McNally, be authorized to sign all warrants, contracts, and all other documents that require her signature, and the vice president of the Board of Education of the Waterloo Community School District, Sue Flynn, be authorized to sign all warrants, contracts, and all other documents that require her signature in the absence of the president, and the signature plate of Shanley McNally, immediate past president of the Board of Education, be authorized to continue as a valid check signature until a plate with the new president can be obtained, and the superintendent be authorized to invest school district monies prior to allocating these funds toward payment of expenditures in accordance with Board Policy 7018, and the Board of Education reaffirms all policies and actions of preceding boards.
So moved.
Thank you, Jesse, and a second by Sue. And all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Chair votes aye. All right. Thank you, Pam. Did I do that all right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks. I need to be walked through despite the fact that I've done this before. I still don't know what I'm doing sometimes. So, all right, we'll move on then to Exhibit H. Actually, these are, don't we have item G, the consent agenda? Yeah.
It's the meeting of the last.
Yeah, yep. So we'll move on to the consent agenda then, excuse me. The minutes of the November 9th, 2020 regular board meeting, which is item G, the personnel appointments and adjustments, which are item H, the bills due and payable and the bills paid between board meetings, which is item I, and the appointment of the board member to the Blackhawk County Conference Board, which is item J. So can I have a motion to get those items on the table?
So moved.
Thank you, Jesse. And a second? Second. Sue? And are there any items that board members wish to have removed from the consent agenda this evening?
H and J, please.
H and J. All right, then all those in favor of approval of items G and I, please signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed, same sign. Chair votes aye. Motion carried. That takes us then to item H. See, I knew we'd get to item H, which is on page 20. And that recommended motion is the Board of Education approve the personnel items as listed.
So moved.
Thank you, Jesse. And a second? Second. Thank you, Sue. And discussion. Stacie?
I had just sent a couple of questions to Kingsley.
Okay,
so
sure.
I don't know which ones he can answer
Yeah,
in this
so-
meeting, but whatever you can do.
I'll try to answer as much as I can. Actually, this is a question asked by another board member as well around the Life Labs coordinator position. I think all I can say at this time is that, we have been in conversation with, I know Dr. Lindeman has been in conversation with McElroy Trust. It's an important position, and so we are taking our time and thinking about when we're looking to post for that position, but we will be posting for that position this year. And so that's all the information I can share at this time, but once we have more information, we'll make sure we update you on that. The other questions on here, any other questions in relation to just the personnel appointments, or I'm going to speak specifically to their terminations. Was there anything else?
Lyle,
There
you had a
questions around?
question, I think, didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Before I get to that.
About Paris.
We continue to see a lot of activity on the special needs para. There's a number on leave of absence that are leaving. There's a number that are beginning, but none of those beginning match any of those that are leaving. So are those leaving? Is that another? Are those essentially open now so that there'll be another list in the next meeting to fill those positions?
Potentially, so you'll see some of that shift, but if you're speaking specifically to the leaves of absences, it depends. You have up to 90 days unpaid that you can come back into the position, and so we truly wait for that period. And it's 90 calendar days, not necessarily 90 business days, but we do have to wait. And so we try to figure out how we can cover that gap for as long as we can, and then we allow for the principal to post after we get to that time period.
Okay.
And that means they can still come back, but they may not necessarily have rights to that particular position.
Okay. So how many, how are you doing on the open positions? Are you still short special needs para at this point?
We are, I think, a little. I think we're in a good spot. There's a couple buildings that, when I was answering your question initially, I'm a little bit concerned about, and it's more along the lines of time to just spend some time and actually hire some good people. Just with everything going on, it's just been a lot for our principals, not only with COVID, but just, again, trying to educate our kids. And so with that, there's a couple of positions we actually haven't found people for. We initially posted for them in August, but they just haven't posted for them recently. And so when we moved to the January period, we just recently sent out a email to our principals asking them, hey, who are your teachers that have stated, are they retiring, are they resigning? Some of them we know ahead of time, and so it helps us start to craft our recruitment and hiring period. And some of those positions will then, in January and February, start to get filled for the remainder of the year, as you kind of saw last year as well. But then we'll start to look at what next year is going to look like as well. And so I'll try to maybe put a little bit more meat to this so you can see a little more information as far as how that transition goes, because we're doing some exciting things that we just met about in regards to our affirmative action plan that you approved in July.
So are we at all near the point where, like, district subs, we would have district special need paras?
Not at this point, no. We're not at that point yet.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions in relation to that? Or before termination? Okay.
No, thank you.
So for termination in particular, there are a lot of terminations for this time period. What happened, I guess, to be as brief as possible, you saw a commitment from me, and Dr. Lindeman doesn't even know this, but a commitment from me just to really, with COVID and everything happening in the country and the nation, try to give our folks as much time as possible. And the funny thing is, when I initially answered this question, I was thinking about people that have just recently potentially been terminated. When I look back at the prior terminations, it wasn't speaking to these individuals. In particular, one, when we, and I just say we, not me sometimes I'm at the very end, but my team, in particular Lydia, but also Lorraine, spends sometimes days and weeks calling people. We've even gone so far, and we have to be careful with that as far as calling the doctor's office when we're asking for documentation in relation to leave. So some of these, one particular termination was, we exhausted almost everything. It was almost 2 weeks that we reached out to this employee. I asked Lydia, bless her heart, to call almost every single day just to make sure we do everything that we can that's possible, and then document that by also sending up an email or just leaving a message. So that was one in particular situation. And then just to kind of go through our overall teacher process, anytime that individual is resigning per our policy, they have to resign, it takes 21 days. We sometimes have folks that cut it short. And for us, it's just, again, it's that conversation. I think for us, it was somewhat of a surprise of a potential change of location of the individual that was moving on. And so with that, we just felt like, if those are some of the conversations, let us know ahead of time, because we obviously want to care for the employee. And I've had this conversation via email a couple of times just this week, but we have a balance of how do we make sure we're protecting the employee and doing everything we need to do for them, but also how do we make sure we're covering and educating kids. And it's a tough balance. I don't necessarily do maybe the best job every single time, but I always weigh heavily on the side of making sure we're educating kids and making sure we have people in that position. And so when that time frame is cut short, that's when you may see those terminations come before you. But I know that in prior times we talked about, hey, and Lyle, I think we've talked a little bit about, hey, can we make sure we're working with our employees throughout that? And we do. I just think that sometimes with everything that's happening in life, it may be cut short, but unfortunately with that cut short and not working with us, it becomes really difficult. And if there was offers as far as teaching virtually or whatever the offer could have been, we could have worked something out, but it was kind of see you later, and we're at this point. And again, I'm speaking in generalities for any teacher, just to be clear.
Right. I just had a question as far as a couple of these say end of 1920. Why does it take that long to get on our agenda?
This was one where we found out, a couple of times you'll see we find out about potential loss of license or, dereliction of completing their license or duties late in the game, almost 2 months afterwards. And that's what happened. We go back to when they were eligible at the time for their license, and that's why you may see the 1920. And then there's one more question. Is there something that's happening needs to be addressed? And I think I'm talking more about the next board agenda that's coming up. But like I said, we've tried to be more flexible with people due to COVID and just in general things. I would tell you that our principals and our staff, they're very concerned about when we kind of elongate that time period as far as termination is concerned. I tell them, hey, we're just trying to really help people and make sure that we've answered all the questions. But it's tough. It's tough for our principals because they're in the building every day. I always say to them that I get it. It's not me that's in the building with you having to try to figure it out. But I also want to balance it because sometimes I know more information about what's going on with that employee that they may not know. And so there's a lot of trust that happens there, but that's a part of it as well, just principal and staff concern. And in this, do we help employees that are struggling to attain their coaching qualifications? We do when they reach out. I think we could do a better job of working with people on their licensure. The BOEE last year changed the process by which we can check it quickly. And so we're in a weird spot where we really spent a lot of time, T before Deb, but mainly it was T that spent a lot of time going through they should run a report and go through everybody that license was up and then send them an email. We can't do that any longer. And so we've been working all year, actually, and we're hoping that the state would make a change, but trying to figure out what's the fastest way to do it instead of going through each employee record. And so it makes it tough when they do expire, but when they reach out, we do work with them as much as possible. It's tough too, because it's a licensure thing, and this is one of the few jobs, unfortunately, where you have to have a license and you have to have a valid license, and it's incumbent upon you to make sure that you're paying attention to when those lapse. But we can make sure that we have a conversation with them at, not only just the new teachers meeting, but also the coaches meetings, the coaches class
The Coaches
meetings.
Academy might be another place
Yep.
where you could tap into
To have that conversation, just say, hey, pay attention everybody with your licenses, because it can be some of it of a tough when you expire. The BOE just just takes some time to get that stuff done.
So not to be specific, but if we have somebody who is on here, can I assume then that they knew that it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're aware. The one thing again, and Lyle just mentioned it, because you don't see the next agenda until January, you'll see some potential maybe people reapplying and getting the same position. And so it was kind of awkward to talk about, knowing that that may happen later on, but again, you don't know that until it comes forward.
And the one thing I don't know, I know for teaching license, we get reminders from the state about when I think I just renewed my superintendent license. You're lucky. We're all lucky. I'm certified. But I think I got a notice 12 months in advance and said, just reminder that your license will be expiring in 12 months. Yeah. Now, they may not do that amount of time for a coaching license or for other licenses, but I know some of us get, I think maybe certified, get reminders. Did you get a reminder? So I just can't speak to like coaching or whatever, but I would believe that you do get those reminders, but sometimes you just miss them. I mean, I'm always surprised how many times somebody will come in and say, oh my gosh, I need to file for a 1 month extension, and you can do that, but.
Yeah.
But the district doesn't get the reminder, the individual.
The individual gets the reminder. I got it for my own, and so sometimes an employee will get that reminder and they'll just miss it, and then you get the second reminder and you miss it. I mean, sometimes the stars are all aligned in a negative way and you just miss Stephanie, do you remember how many? I think I got upwards of 6 different reminders. They keep saying 10 months left and 6 months left, and so I just kept getting them until you renew. Yeah, you can renew up to a year in advance for certified, so they start reminding you.
I think for coaching though, because I had it, and I don't think I got reminders because mine expired then.
But that's new that we started getting reminders.
Yeah, this is a while ago.
Yeah,
so.
They've gotten better at giving you reminders. I remember, I don't think I did get a reminder 2 times ago, but I just renewed and I got a reminder this last time. So I think when they changed the system for us, I think they took that on to the reminders.
Yeah, one of the things we can do is look at when they got their license, because we do have that information in our system. We're still working on making sure that's done with 100% fidelity from our team perspective, but then we can show, after 5 years this, after 3 years this, and we can remind them that way. Again, it was just easier doing it on the state portal because you could just, boom, that day, send it out. And so we still haven't worked through those details.
So we're gonna have you're basically have to put together your own tracking sheet based on when you hire them, and based on when they present their information and put a date in, and then.
Absolutely.
And even with the coaching, you have to stay up to date, like CPR or the athletic wrapping part and that kind of thing too.
Yeah, or your driver's license. I mean, you have to know. So that's.
Okay, I got a reminder on that though, but that slipped my attention. I'm just going to be honest. So.
It does.
And we try to give grace with those as well. Before we bring it to you, we try to give a little bit of time. Some of those situations, it's because of when we're in. If this was out of season, you probably wouldn't have seen it. When we're in season, it makes it really tricky because we want to make sure, I think about Joanne Tubbs. She's I won't say anything bad about you, Joanne, if you're listening. But she just feels like Waterloo does a really good job of holding people accountable to their licenses. And so I just wanted to make sure to continue, the work that Bev did and obviously T did before she left or she moved on to another position, is just making sure that we're really sticking to those licenses. And again, it's helps for teachers as well. It's not I've never seen a situation where somebody's like, I didn't care about it, didn't have a license. It's more, hey, it slipped my mind, or I thought I got it in, and we work with people as much as we can.
I figured you did. I just kind of wanted
No,
to
it's a good
ask.
question. No, it's a good question.
And it might be they cannot work even one day when they're not even 1 hour if you are not licensed. And sometimes people will say, I heard my license is coming tomorrow. Can I just?
Nope.
You cannot. Not even one day.
Yeah.
So.
Can a volunteer coach?
I don't think you can volunteer either. You
No.
cannot work if you
we have
are.
we have to be careful with those because we don't want to seem like we're circumventing the process in one way or another.
Well, even volunteer, you got to have your papers.
Yeah, you have to get all the background check and everything else. And the last one was just the process of terminating employees and positions. And I'm speaking to this board agenda, and then I'll try to do a reminder next time as well. Was it 100% followed? Yes. And so the process in general, when we're talking about terminating employees, normally we've given them either 2 to 3 opportunities, and normally Two, and the third one is, hey, you're going to be terminated, where we either provide a summary of contact or we provide written emails saying, hey, you've exhausted all your leave. We've tried to contact you a number of times, and we've really gotten pretty good at our system in regards to that. We actually have, we have monthly meetings before payroll is run just to make sure there aren't any issues from that standpoint. Now, because we wanted to eliminate any hiccups, we also have weekly meetings in regards to leaves as well to make sure that, hey, we haven't lost an employee, because sometimes when I say that, I don't mean we've lost anybody, but when people go out for extended sick leave, we may not know about it. The building may know, but we change some things to make sure that we're aware, and also that we're providing support. If you're gone for 30 days, has anybody checked up on you? And we check up on every single person that has a sick day in the system if it doesn't have a note. We're trying to provide a different level of service to our employees to make sure that they feel it. And again, it's not a call sometimes it's just an email. Maybe at certain times I may call, but we're trying to, again, provide that. What can we do to make sure this is the best place to work, and that we're giving you a lot of chances, and we're providing that notice, and that notice via documentation as well.
So, you're speaking to the people who have been gone, right? The job, basically ones that's what you're talking about with terminations.
Terminations.
But the ones the terminations for people who have not been in the buildings. That's what you're talking about right now, right?
Correct.
Okay, so if we were to have somebody on here who that's not why, what's your process with them?
Well, are we talking about just general for teacher terminations?
Well, not always
Or
teacher.
support staff terminations?
If it's easier to talk about it later, that's fine.
Well, in general, we're talking about, so there's 3 different levels I would think of for terminations. One particular level could be, job performance. We've consistently had conversations, write-ups in job performance, and there's just a commitment that I won't bring anything to you unless we've walked through that chain.
That's
everybody
yeah.
knows that as well, whether it's, any department. I've sent people away where they haven't followed up with a summary contract, or maybe even had a conversation with them that, until you give me documentation, it's like it doesn't happen. And I always look at it from my experience, from a legal background, saying, it's only what you can prove. And so, not to say I don't believe you, but because many of the commentary that I get when I initially meet with a staff member at the end is, well, this person never had a conversation with me. That's a problem. And so we've walked through each of the terminations that will come before you. We've walked through a number of different summary of contacts or email correspondence from my office, just to make sure that we follow that process.
Thank you.
Lyle, you giving him another A?
I will.
All right, let's do it.
All right.
This is the best
right.
board, by the way.
Run. All right. Sorry about that, Lyle. Didn't mean to catch you off guard. All right, so then all those in favor of approving the personnel appointments and adjustments, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, same sign. Chair votes aye. Motion carried. That takes us to item J, which is on page 32. And this is for the appointment of the board member to the Blackhawk County Conference Board. And the recommended motion is the Board of Education approve the appointment of Lyle Schmitt to the Blackhawk County Conference Board.
So moved.
And a second? And thank you, Sue. And discussion. I can't remember who pulled. Stacie, did you pull? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna ask if I could kind of,
Oh, yeah. Shadow?
shadow you this year if you'd mentor me so I can look at doing it next year, if you'd be open to that.
Sure, I think so. Yeah, it's an open meeting. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
And you could kind of walk me through what you did.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
thank you.
We can have some pathways for.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Thanks, Lyle. And
It's
that,
the assessor's office has a separate budget, so that's the one thing you deal with is the budget for the assessor's office. It's a small budget, but it's separate for some reason that I don't really understand. But and then of course the assessor's office is involved in evaluations, settling disputes when someone
land.
what's the right word? Disputes their tax assessment, and then the other items are how do they keep current on their assessments? So there's certain software that they use to monitor different city functions to see if someone has added a building or something and not reported it. There's some activity in the area of aerial surveillance for the same reasons, that they look at properties and make sure they're consistent with what's on the tax rolls. So it's things like that. So it's the budget, and then it's the really the integrity of the whole assessment system to make sure it's current and the processors are there to keep it current, and that it's fair relative to different properties. So that's kind of in a nutshell what that whole conference board does. But in the end, the conference board itself is, and these meetings are a quorum of quorums, if you will. The mayors have to have a quorum.
Right, they call.
The school district representatives have to have a quorum in order for them, that
To count.
element, to become eligible to vote. So it's kind of interesting.
Well, thank you for agreeing to serve, and thank you for agreeing to step up to serve. And Pam, maybe when those notices come, we can just make sure that we get both board members CC'd on that. So,
No, I appreciate it, Lyle.
okay.
And
There's no one better to learn from.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But,
So-
and just if any other board member is interested in the Planning and Zoning Commission, I'm I have learned so much on
Yeah.
that board. I really have. I've learned a lot. But if anybody would like to do that, I've served for, well, Mike Young, I took over for him.
Yep.
So I've been on it a while. And it's very interesting. But you learn a lot about planning and zoning and illegal buildings and, that type of
So
stuff.
what we're doing here is succession planning.
I was just gonna say, well, it's the night to reorganize the board, so here we go. It's our annual
But,
meeting.
yeah,
so-
so just because we've never had an alternate or anything, because
Yeah.
it's kind of hard, you
To
have
do
to
that,
know
okay.
what's going on and stuff
Yeah,
to
to
do
have a
that. But
say.
I'm just saying that if anybody would be interested in that,
Okay.
Jesse, at some time.
No, going forward.
I don't know about voting on blue buildings.
Oh, you guys. All right, well then, all those in favor of approving Lyle Schmitt to the Blackhawk County Conference Board, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, same sign. And chair votes aye, motion carried, and we'll put the P and Z on the to-do list, so, yeah. All right, the next item on our agenda is Exhibit K, and these are board policy changes. This is the first reading, and I would invite Tara Thomas up to the microphone, and she's already here to walk us through this.
Thank you. We just had one policy for you to review, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
I just wanted to make sure, when we did this, I did ask about where it says the school district may charge a reasonable fee for each copy, but I was assured that's really not something that ever happens. It's just put in there as an in case,
Yeah,
so.
Somebody needed 5,000
Yeah,
pages.
right,
Right.
so.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tara. We'll see this in our first meeting in January? Yes. Yes? Okay, super. All right, I'm not sure where we are with Michael. Do we have Michael on the line? Just because we're gonna move on then to our next item, which is, great. I don't know how we wanna do that. Do you wanna call him back on this?
Okay, go ahead.
Michael, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Excellent, okay. So this is Exhibit L, and this is for interfund loan resolution. And the recommended motion here is that the Board of Education adopt the amended resolution authorizing an interfund loan between the General Fund and the Capital Projects Fund of up to $1.5 million, the Physical Plant and Equipment Levy Fund for up to $1.5 million, the Food Service Fund up to $1.2 million, and the Student Activity Fund up to $500,000 as provided under the DE declaratory order.
So moved.
Excuse me, thank you,
Second.
Sue, and seconded by Stacie. And discussion, Michael?
This is just an annual resolution that the board has to recognize that in the business office, because of procedural
Yep.
software issues such as food service people, when we run payroll every month, it goes through the general fund. That's just the way our software is set up. And then we transfer the money back into the food service fund to make it right. So that's just a procedural thing that happens because of our software. And we have to document that the board is aware of these interfund changes of our balances for different situations, because every fund can only be used for its own particular purpose, as you know. But sometimes it does cross just because of the way a software is set up, like for food service. Also, the student activity fund can have payroll issues that people are getting paid, but it really goes through the general fund first. With the SAVE fund and the PEPL fund, it's really an issue based on when our funds are available and how quickly we may complete a project. I believe all of these amounts that I've got listed here that we've been using for a few years are very conservative. I'm not really anticipating us getting close to these balances, but it does give us some breathing room in case there is an unusual situation. But we only do it for the amounts that we need to. So it isn't that like we're going to just use these amounts as interfund loans between the accounts. They are done for specific purposes and then paid back as quickly as possible when the funds are available in the fund that they're supposed to come out of.
Makes perfect sense, Michael. Thank you. Does anybody have questions for Michael regarding this? All right. Then seeing none, all those in favor of approving the interfund loan resolution, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, same sign. Chair votes aye, motion carried. That takes us then to item M, and this is the comprehensive annual financial report. And the recommended motion here is that the Board of Education accept the recommendation of the District Finance Committee to receive and place on file the Waterloo Community School District 2019-2020 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report.
So move.
Thank you, Sue. And a second? Thank you, Jesse. Technically, it comes from committee, so it doesn't even need a second, but good. Yes, thank you. All right. Sorry, I don't know why I just said that out loud. Never mind. So, Michael, I will turn it over to you for the annual financial report. I know I'm getting punchy. Look out.
Okay, I did. I don't know if you have access to see my screen. Is that happening?
Not yet, but we'll get there.
We're visualizing it.
You start talking, and Pam's going to pull it back up.
Okay,
And-
so on an annual basis, the audit is completed in the fall, and then the auditors come in and meet with the business office and Dr. Lindemann, the superintendent, and we have a preliminary meeting for any type of questions or situations that need to be discussed. And then it is presented to the Finance Committee, and the head, one of the partners from Bergen, the accounting firm that we use comes in, or this year virtual, as the whole audit was, meets with us again as far as presenting findings for the audit, and they present this little PowerPoint presentation that the Finance Committee asked me to review at the meeting tonight. So, and that starts on page 38 of your board book if you have that, or else I'm on screen. Did we get anything accomplished?
Yes, Michael, it's up on our screen now, and if you just want to keep using your phone, we've shut off the microphone through the Google Meet, so just keep talking into the phone. You can put it on speaker if you want.
No, that sounds good. Okay, thank you. The auditor report, the first thing that they came out to mention is that they presented us again with an unmodified opinion on the district's basic financial statements, which basically says this is the best opinion that an auditor can issue. There isn't any major concerns. Everything's presented fairly in all material respects concerning the position or any changes in position from the previous years. We do have different types of accounts, governmental funds. The general fund, special revenue is like SAVE and PEPO. The debt service fund and the capital project fund are paying those back. But these are revenues that are coming from government support or taxes. And we have proprietary funds that are supposed to support themselves, school nutrition and the print shop. But school nutrition also gets state and federal subsidies. But it isn't supported by tax dollars. The fiduciary funds are private purpose funds, like a trust fund for scholarship, or the agency fund is just some funds that are held by the district. Most of what we have in that is just all of the teacher social accounts that they want to just put some money aside of their own to then use for specific purposes like flowers or something in need for another staff member. Those aren't really the district funds. They are from the people that put their own money in there. So we have three different types of funds. And if you look through the audit, it does reference different types of funds that are being presented in the financial worksheets that you see in the big report. The school foundation aid, they were talking about how the district has been successful because the school foundation aid or the allowable growth or the SSA, the new growth in a particular year has been going up at a pretty steady rate over the last 6 or 7 years. It isn't the 4% that we saw in 10 years ago, but we are continuing. We've been mostly in 2% plus, and then it shows what our cost per pupil, what that generates. So in that, it does give the impression that when you have a 2.25% allowable growth or SSA in the budget year of 2017, we should be in pretty good shape. But I just want to review with that there's a little more to the story than just the SSA rate. And I've kind of expanded that sheet to bring up other criteria with this. Now let's go back to that 2016-17 budget where there's 2.25% increase. That sounds like positive, but if you look over on the second to the right column, our enrollment actually went down 199 kids that year. So instead of getting 2.25, we only got 1%, and we were actually under the budget guarantee. So you really have to look at the SSA plus the enrollment impact to get an effect on how the district was affected by the allowable growth rate. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples with this. In 2019-20 budget year, and this was the year that the audit was concerned with, we got 2.14% SSA growth, but because our enrollment dropped 102, we got 1.18%. We did have differences if you go down to the bottom two lines. In 14-15, it was 4%, but because of our enrollment going up 188 students, we only got 5.82%. Likewise, in 15-16, it was 1.25, but we increased 142, so we got 2.57%. And this is just kind of giving you a heads up of really what we've got looking at us in the future for next year. And I can talk about this year. The 2021 budget, it was 2.44% SSA, and the enrollment went up 88 students. So our new money was really 3.29%. But what we're looking at as far as what's happening for the following year, because we just took enrollment October of 20, and it dropped 238 students. So even if the SSA is very positive, our new money is going to be affected. We would have to get, I think we looked at it at the finance committee, that we would have to get close to 4% new money from the SSA, that we wouldn't be in a budget guarantee situation again. So it really is not just the SSA percentage, but it is what our enrollment has done, and with our enrollment dropping in the last count, the budget for 20 be very much affected by what SSA rate the legislature approves, or they have been talking about an issue because so many districts are showing us a pretty significant decline, that there are, I know ISPIS is looking at suggesting a hold harmless clause for the year. So we're not really sure how they're going to address it when so many would go into a budget guarantee situation. And what that does is raise property taxes for the local property tax payer based on a budget guarantee. So I know there's going to be a lot of work between the governor and the legislators in this behalf. But I just wanted to give you an idea of, even if we see a good SSA growth amount, our declining enrollment from last October is going to have an impact. But just a little more to the story than just what the SSA rate is. The next slide is just a more detailed look at that, and if anyone has particular
Hello.
Are you still there?
Yes, hang on. Oops.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Do we know what the statewide decrease was this year?
Michael, do we know what the statewide decrease is in enrollment? I do not have that right now. I do know that everyone was significantly down. There were a few districts that were up, but I believe Margaret told me 20% of districts were up and 80% were down.
I think I saw a number and I don't remember. It was either 6,000
70 and 60.
6,000 or 9,000 students less than last year, which would be
I think it's more than that.
about 1.8%.
Well, I can tell you, I know that Davenport was down. Michael, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay, I believe Davenport was down 400, Des Moines was down 1,200. 1,100, sorry. Cedar Rapids was down how much, Michael?
600.
600. I mean, so it was,
Yeah,
it was significant.
I think a little less than what we are probably statewide average.
Statewide,
Okay.
maybe. I don't actually know.
I think statewide.
Yeah. I'm not exactly sure. I haven't seen those numbers.
So if they did it across the board, we'd come out about even, I guess. If they disproportionately increase the student aid to 3% or 4% or whatever it is to make up for the lost students, whether they do it that way or do the hold harmless, probably isn't going to make a lot of difference. But maybe Michael's figured that one out.
Yeah, Michael did a calculation on which one would be better for us, whether it was the hold harmless or the increased. He sent that to us, and
Yeah.
I can't remember. There was one that was better, and I'm just looking for it real quickly. So I thought it was the SSA. So I have it here.
So the interesting, I think a couple interesting is like, you know, what is, you know, you look at statewide, but also look at, you know, what's the UEN schools, what their enrollment look like,
Yeah.
you know, just comparable. Yeah, I don't know, did we see, would you say we saw particular buildings that were probably hurt more enrollment than others, or was it just kind of spread?
Yeah, elementaries were fairly consistently across the drop, and middle schools were semi-flat. I think at middle school, gosh, boy, it's been a little while since I've looked at since October 1. I'm going to say, weren't we down like 12 or 15 kids at middle school? So those were pretty consistent, and the high schools were up. So it really, yeah, yep. And that has been, we have kind of inverted that at the high schools. I think the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, we have been increased at the high school and lower at the elementary.
That's very interesting, because I would, you know, my anticipation, and just based on hearing, was kids deciding to graduate early because they didn't want to do, and you know, losing kids early because they.
Yeah, no, I really think the bulk of our decrease was at the kindergarten level. So, and you know, the question is, how will we rebound? Will there be students who will come? But I also heard that some of the students who may have started preschool may not have started preschool. So will they do a year of preschool with them and then send them to kindergartners?
Yeah.
So I just don't, so maybe some of the kids that would have come next fall for kindergarten won't come. But kids who are going to
Maybe
come this year will come next
we may
year. So
stagger a
we
couple years out,
may
you
just
know.
be 1 year delayed for a little while. So
I have it.
really
I
don't
have it
know.
here. The drop was 5,935 students,
okay,
1.2%
okay,
drop
6,000.
overall. Interesting is that homeschooling was up by almost 7,000. So that's where they're at. Homeschool.
That's interesting. I wonder if it might have been just due to some people going out of higher risk jobs, you know, and going elsewhere to find other work,
Yeah.
employment.
It
you
could
know.
be that, and the other thing too is that it
families.
was not required to do a virtual program for anyone except for students who had compromised immune, medical issues. So some districts chose not to do virtual programs, and so those students were either, if they, it's not required by law. We did, but a lot of districts didn't. So then your option, if you didn't want to go to school, was to do homeschooling. So in some districts, that's the case.
So the real question is whether the homeschoolers end up enrolling next year, and a lot will that depend on, what we offer and the environment.
Yeah, our homeschooling was not up, so we would not be in that same camp with other
Oh,
districts.
okay.
And what about like the CARES dollars? How do we figure that into, I mean, obviously it's not per pupil or anything, but do they use any criteria or formula or whatever to award that, and then how it's, I guess, disseminated into our budget and our students? And
Right. Michael, do you want to talk with that? There's the CARES federal dollars, and then there's CARES state dollars, and then there's the GEAR dollars. So there's multiple banks of money. The only one that's the one that's the significant amount is the federal, CARES federal, and that was, I think, 2.5 million. 2.4 million, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other ones were,
For the district, it was 2.4, and some of the non-publics, got additional 400,000 in that. And the state CARES money was just a remainder of what the state didn't use, and they passed it on. For us, it was like $80,000. So it wasn't significant compared to the federal. Also, the GEAR money was for the district was 482,000, and that has been primarily used for the internet connections that Matt was referring to before. But whatever wasn't used could then be used to purchase additional computer hardware. So that at this point, I believe we have all of that money used.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael.
Do we want to go on with this?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm looking at page 41, or I'm just then illustrating again by this slide the enrollment changes over the last 5 years, and then also projecting forward the enrollment numbers to today, because really, as you see on the far right, the October 2020 count is the number that we use for 21-22.
Right.
So it's a year ahead of time. So it just gives you a little relationship of, for our current budget of 2021, we're using a higher enrollment figure or increased enrollment figure. And then for 21-22, we see the decline. And that's going to have the impact we were talking about, depending on what legislation does. And then they went on to just document what types of revenue that we had, the levels that were coming from federal at the bottom, the state sources and the local sources at the top. If you look over on the 2020 column on the far right, the federal sources did go up from the previous years, and that is almost entirely because of the CARES money. Normally we had 8.5 to 9.5 million, and we went up to 11.6. The state sources have been climbing at a consistent basis, up to 87 million last year, and part of that is from the work that the property tax relief, the new cost of the district, the new money that I had in the other charts, that money is not passed on, that amount is not passed on to the taxpayers. It is absorbed into the state budget and added to state aid. So that's the majority of that number is state aid. Then there's also several other more minor state fundings, TSS and TLC and TQPD and some of these acronyms that you've heard that we get on an annual basis based on our student enrollment. And then the local sources are primarily property tax. Out of that 37 million, about 28 to 29 million is property tax, and then the rest is anything from income or interest income to tuition that other districts pay us, that have sent us their kids. So that's the majority of where the revenues are coming from, and they have been going up every year as a total amount. And then this is a chart of the function area. They call it program, but that's probably what common terminology would be. What program are you talking about? Instruction or special ed or vocational? As you look down the left-hand side, and it's showing how much money that we're spending in each of those areas. Probably the most significant number in there is regular instruction.
You keep dropping calls.
Hello.
Okay, I'm not sure why we keep dropping calls.
Okay, I don't know. So I was talking about the top line of the regular instruction that we're investing another $3 million in that, up to $60 million. And that is, part of that is the CARES money, that all of the technology that we purchased, but we're also showing a steady increase in teacher salaries with the additional hours that we put on their schedule last year, and also raised the starting wage. And sometimes pictures are better than numbers, so this is the pie chart that they provided to say regular instruction, it's 43%, special ed, my screen is getting blocked here, so I have to look. No, it's not showing there either. But, so it's showing the regular instruction, the special instruction, vocational, other instruction, and then on the left-hand side it gets into all the student services, everything from curriculum to the building administration, to the board and superintendent administration. The business and HR is the 3%, and then the operation maintenance is 8%, and transportation is 3%. So that kind of gives you a breakdown in a pie form of how we are spending our money. And I know it has been a question in the past, how do we compare with a state average? So it's a year behind because the School Board Association or the Forecast 5 people that I use, they don't get timely information from the state to be able to say how was it for everybody in the 2019-20 year. That won't be out for a few months here. But just to give you an idea of how it was in 2019, the instructional, for the instruction, the state average was 62%, and Waterloo was 64%. And for the student services, it was 33% across the state and 31% for Waterloo. Waterloo has one little sliver up about 11 o'clock that doesn't even show on the state because that was a community non-instructional service, and what that refers to is our interpreters. They are not instructional. They are a service to the ELL students. So it is kind of a unique cost that we have that is not very prevalent on the state average. It's so small they don't even list it. And then when you look at, I think that's 0.5% or something. It didn't even show on the graph. But the last category is the amount of money that we pass on to the AEAs. we're at 4.03%, and the state average is 4.02. So we really are very comparable to the whole state average. Okay, I'm going to continue with just some comparisons on the expenditures, salaries, benefits, and so on. And there is a lot of similarities, but the one thing I wanted to point out is that on the salaries, we're showing that we're a little over 1% lower than the state average. But that has a big part to do with our nursing and bus drivers that we pay through a purchase service and not a salary wage. So that would have an effect for us. That also does bump up our purchase service amount. When you look at the 4.07, that would be part of that compared to the 2.8% average for the state. So that's just a comparison in 2019, how we compared to the state, to give you an idea of where we're at. There's also a chart of what our expenditures have been doing over the last 12 years, showing a pretty steady increase in salaries at the bottom and benefits, and then you get into the lower amounts toward the top. The general fund operations, we had, if you look over at the far right column under 2020, it was 2 million short of what the expenditure were, and that was in a point that we have talked about our budget kind of peaking, and we are kind of cresting, and we did plan on reducing our balances a little bit at the end of 20. And that's what happens as our revenues are a little short of our expenditures, and that was planned. But COVID issues kind of complicated the whole picture. But one thing that did have an effect, I've got the box at the bottom. We did have revenues in 2019-20 that did come in less than what we were expecting, even less than knowing we were going to be a little bit short on revenues compared to expenditures. So between interest income dropping, donations dropping, non-public transportation dropping, and Medicaid reimbursements dropping, of that 2 million we were short, 1.3 was caused directly by COVID issues. So it didn't drop a lot overall, but was compounded by the drop because of the COVID situation. This is just a breakdown of the ending fund balance that we have in the general fund of 18.5 million. If we're going up from the bottom, this was actually the number in the treasurer's report that you approved early in the meeting, and 15.1% is not assigned, which means it has no commitment to it. But when you go up the list, we have 1.2 set aside for alternative health insurance plan that we can use for that. And then as you go up the list, the significant number is the teacher leadership. There's 854,000 that was carried over, and you look at educator quality professional development, or what we call TQPD, carried over about 800,000. Both of those had some effect because of the COVID issues. Some of them had an effect because of assigning different teacher coaches to other funding rather than to this teachership account. Those will be addressed in the 21 budget, and I expect both of those numbers to come down significantly. They are not increases from the prior year. It's just that there wasn't as many people assigned to that funding, and it will be for next year. So we will bring that back into more of a natural trend that has been in as you look in the years past. There was a chart that you had in the book that showed our tax rate. And the tax rate percentage is on the bottom line graph, showing that the last 2 years it's been $14.20 per thousand, had been dropping over the last 5 years, and the amount of property tax askings, the dollar amount, and this includes all funds. It would be general fund, management fund, PEPAL fund, the voted PEPAL and the board PEPAL, those all together with the cash reserve amounts, we've been staying right around that $40 million, but that's all the funds, not just the general fund. The nutrition fund was also something that the auditors pay special attention to, and they brought this up in the discussion. And if you look across the top line, you can see starting in 2016, it was 1.2 million plus. These were fees collected from students for lunch tickets, lunch cost. And you can see the last 2 years it has declined dramatically, down to 700,000 in 2018-19, and then 147,000 in 1920. That is because this is the first year that CEP was for all of the buildings together. So no student was paying for a regular lunch. The 147,000 plus is a la carte meals and staff meals. So there is still some revenue that comes in that way, but it's not for the regular reimbursed lunch. And against that, then they take the full amount of the lunch fund cost of $6 million, and we're short $5.8 million. Well, then they add the federal and state reimbursement of 5.5, and that came down a little bit because of the COVID close and the number of lunches being served, and so on. So that left a shortfall in the fund of over 300,000, and that was the CARES money that the board approved to come out of the general fund to offset that, to bring the balance, to cover the negative balance. That $194 is a change in position. It's the ending balance was positive, but it changed $194 less than the year before. But we would have been way under without the CARES money. The last chart on here dealt with the certified budget, and when we approved the tax rate and the total expenditures allowed in the budget that we publish in the paper and approve the tax rate, then we have the allowable expenditures that the district cannot exceed, and those are on the far left. If you look under the expenditures, there are 4 different categories, and this includes all the funds, whether they are supported by taxes or whether they are enterprise funds, self-supporting, and so on. So this is all the expenditures in the district. So the total budget for the district in expenditures was $179 million. that was conservatively high in the other expenditures, which are the capital project amount, and that really was, as I say in the note below, we approve that amount a year in advance, April of 2019, or a few months in advance of the year that we are in, 1920. So at that time, we were certainly up in the air, as we still are, of how the whole Lowell project and damage claim is going to shake out. So it was projected high, but we cannot spend any more than the revenue that we have, so we can't overspend that. We would have to, if we were going to go that high, we would have to secure funding like we did with a bond issue, so on. So they make a note of that, the auditors do, that we stayed within our budget. So if you look on the far right column, the variances under the expenditures, what we budgeted, we were short of that in what we spent. So we stayed under budget for all of our categories. And if that's what is illegal for us to go over without securing more revenue in the carryover balances that we have. So it was conservatively estimated, especially because of the capital projects in the Lowell project. So that one is $10 million over, but that was conservative because we didn't know, and we are still dealing with the issue with the Lowell project. The last slide is what we refer to as the audit comments. And there are 30 or 40 different areas that the auditors examine. And if they are out of place in a material way, they will note it in our audit. And we have had comments in the past. The most recent one of remembrance is the whole issue we were dealing with public purpose and spending money out of an activity fund or out of the general fund that didn't meet the definition of public purpose. And we've actually been wrestling with that for about 5 years with the audit and with the state auditor. It's not a large amount of money that any of it has been, and we've had to switch some things around to make sure they're just coming out of the appropriate fund. And we've been working with them, and we've been able to get that comment out of this audit for the first time since it started. And that is something that most districts have been wrestling with for a number of years with this. And we did have one comment that was for even how small it is for our enrollment being 2.22 per 2 students off out of almost 11,000 students is a very small number indeed, but they have to record any difference in the enrollment because it's something that is then reported in the following budget, and we make a correction on that in the next aid and levy calculation of our taxes. So we will have a 2.22 correction to our funding formula for next year. But all in all, with all of the areas that they look at, my perspective is that we had no comments in all of the other areas and only comments in one minor area that we were very pleased with how we came through the audit, what they found, what questions they had, and that they gave us an unmodified opinion that everything was presented fairly. We did go through this with the Finance Committee, and I would be open to any comments they have or questions with this, but that's what I had to present for the audit for 1920.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for your patience as we work through our technical difficulties. I just want to reiterate on behalf of the Finance Committee, I thought we had a very nice discussion with the auditor, the woman who presented. As usual, I was impressed that her interactions with our staff, she particularly commented on how easy they were to work with, especially in a year that has been extraordinary. And so kudos to all of your staff as well on this very clean and very positive audit. So Lyle and Sue, I don't mean to talk for all of us, so go ahead.
Yeah, and I think cleaning up some of the past comments was a big step forward.
Me too.
The enrollment numbers, because that's so dynamic and comes in after the fact, student can be there one day and not the next, and then you got those fractionals. I don't know that anybody ever gets that 100%. It would be just be luck to have 0.0, but yeah, and I think there's been headway made in terms of automation of the data. In other words, the speed at which the district responded seemed to be impressive to the auditor, and I think that's because more and more of the data is now programmed to just automatically roll up to whatever number it is. So as long as the process is there for everybody to key in the right codes for all the expenditures originally, it seems like it's becoming quite well automated, and that of course also helps with the accuracy as long as you code right from the beginning. So yeah, I think it's commendable job, as we usually get from Michael and his staff.
And I concur with both comments. I mean, the auditor had just very high praises, and I do think also to, it seems like we're each year, even a small ding, we have been worked towards removing that, and I just really appreciate the proactiveness. Obviously, they tell us something we could work on, but we work on it so well that it is no longer a problem. So I appreciate that. And just the staff, their hard work is just impeccable, is basically what the auditor said, that they did a great job. So that's all I have to add to.
I think it's a real strength of our district. I think the credibility and the accuracy of the whole financial situation. There was,
House is in good shape.
There was one chart that I don't know if we mentioned, and that was that the tax levy has stayed same or gone down each of the last 5 years in terms of the rate. I think Michael mentioned that, but I think that's worth underscoring. Is that so far we've not had a levy, a millage rate increase for quite a few years.
I think it's been a dull meeting.
Yeah.
Keep it. And I mean, the city's, the school's portion, we hold that pretty to the line, and I just really appreciate that.
All right. Well, all those in favor then of approving the 2019-2020 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, same sign. Chair votes aye. Motion carried. Michael, I hope you didn't go anywhere because you're the next on the agenda. For information only, this is our financial information. And I'm not sure if you can hear me, Michael, but if you have anything to present, you certainly can, or we can also, I think the four of us here that we've seen these many times, so we can even talk about it again in January if need be. It's not like we're ending our fiscal year tonight. Yeah, yeah, okay. All right, so duly noted on the financial information. With that, I can turn it over to Dr. Lindeman for her superintendent's report.
Okay, well, I actually wrote out my comments so that might help, because I won't ramble. I'll just stick to the script here,
fine.
so. I just wanted to make some comments about the Return to Learn plan and just give a few updates on that. So, the first thing, I guess, just talking within the health and safety portion of our plan, which, as you know, we have an entire committee, that's our health and safety committee, but we've really continued to monitor our numbers very closely. We are really happy to report that we're significantly down on our numbers of absences due to either COVID positive or quarantines. So that's really good news. Matter of fact, I would share that, you know, we I think as of today, I think the numbers that I saw today at 10 o'clock, there was changing, but I think it was 125 absences, and that, of course, now we're only required by statute to report or to count in COVID-related absences the number of positives. We actually count COVID positive and quarantines. It just gives a better picture of the absences, and so it was 125, and so of course not all of those are positive by any means. Matter of fact, the vast majority are not, but they do have, you know, some have quarantines, and as we've reported before, you know, as we talk with students, the vast majority of those are still exposures that are happening outside of school because life happens, and so you know, that's, you know, the good news, and that's 1.5% of our in-person kids. So that's down. I think before Thanksgiving, we had reported we were over 600 COVID-related absences. So it's really significantly down. With that, I guess I would also say that, you know, we continue to work with Blackhawk County Public Health. As everyone listening, and certainly the board knows, we participated in part of a community-wide mitigation strategy along with Cedar Falls Schools and with the City of Waterloo, the City of Cedar Falls, and other organizations within the metro area along the lines of COVID mitigation. And so, you know, we closed down for 1 week and went virtual. And so right now we're looking at Blackhawk County. We knew right away that we would not really see the impact of that until at least 2 weeks later, because they were really waiting for that 10 to 14 days to pass to find out if there was a spike in cases. And I think anybody who's watching those numbers, we were, you know, almost 27% positivity before Christmas, and I believe today, I just looked it up, it was Thanksgiving, sorry, 12.6 is what I think I saw this afternoon. So definitely have continued to come down. I know we have another call or another meeting with Blackhawk County staff, and I think that's, Kingsley can tell me, I think it's Thursday, right? We're meeting with Blackhawk County again Thursday, yeah. So, and we're talking with them about, you know, the question I get asked, will you do that same thing along with the winter break? And so I don't know yet, but I do know that when we make those decisions, we try to get that information out ASAP, because people need to have those plans. So I'm not announcing anything by any means. We have a meeting coming up, and so we'll look at that. So, continuing on the Return to Learn plan, working with our virtual students, Dr. Bullhorn and her team have done a couple of modifications to the plan. We've recently added, started working November, December, every month. We added live lessons for the virtual students, and so they can log in and see a Waterloo teacher on some of the lessons for art and music and PE, and we had our thank you to our staff who prepared those lessons, and there's social emotional learning lessons done by our counselors. We had several counselors who volunteered to create lessons, and so those are on there, and they're recorded too, so people can, you know, watch them at their leisure. So that is helpful. We do know that we are still, I'm going to use the word attacking. We're still attacking the issue of students who aren't where they need to be on expectations, having conversations, looking at participation rates. Recently, we sent out some letters and are continuing to work with elementary students who are falling short of the login time and the participation, and asking them, you know, kind of placing them on a probation, I guess is the best maybe word to say. We have to have you doing your work, and so you know, here's what we expect from you over the next 3 weeks, And then at that time, we're gonna make a decision as what is the best plan. So we're working on that. Those letters are already out to the elementary, the middle school letters, I believe. Dr. Mohorn told me those are going out very soon. The middle school letters are going out soon, and continuing to work through that. So looking at those, complying with the governor's proclamation of limiting groups. There was one part of the proclamation that ended today. Our middle school students are back participating today. I know I've got a couple of wrestlers at my house, and you do too, so I think they were pretty excited this morning to get their PE clothes ready to go, so that's good. And then I guess that's all I would say on Return to Learn. There's certainly lots going on. And then just another note, I guess, as we go into the holidays, we're still supporting our families. I know for many of us, the holiday season is really a uplifting, positive time, and that, we're very cognizant that is not the case universally. And so we are working with families to continue to offer support, whether it's food security. We're going to make sure we're working with families on that. We are doing a lot with, some parents are wanting to buy gifts, and, that's an issue. And so, looking at support for holiday gifts, you can actually look here. We had a community organization. We're actually acting as the conduit for some donations that are coming in. They actually are housed here. Mental wellness support. So we're going to continue to do that. Even though we are not in school, we continue to do that. So if parents need anything, of course, call us. It's a great place to start with the counselors or the family support workers, all of that. And then the other thing, which seems really crazy, but we started, today we launched some ISASP work, Iowa Statewide Assessment of Student Progress. That doesn't happen until April, but we are doing some whole-scale things across all of our 18 buildings, and we started that today. So we will continue to work on that, but that's just a few things for the update.
Thank you. Okay, I think that Lyle's on an island over there, so I'm gonna start with him.
What's the problem here?
Was it something you said, or?
Yeah, exactly. I will start with him for any board comments or
A
report.
little self-conscious over here. I'm certainly supportive of the more local involvement in the merch hall, but we do need to objectively evaluate and say, is it as good as it sounds? And I think it probably is, but still, objective evaluation I think needs to follow. On the assessments, the state's backed off assessment requirements, right? Shouldn't we proceed anyway? Can we proceed anyway in order to really get a handle on how well our students are?
Yeah, we definitely, nothing has changed yet. I heard some talk that there would be a request to legislators to take action and withdraw the requirements for the statewide testing. We really want to take the test, and so we will proceed that way. The only negative could come is if they remove the requirement and then it's not offered through Iowa testing, and so that could be a problem. But we are intending to proceed, and we, like I said, we've started today, and we're doing all kinds of work behind the scenes.
So we would lobby for the option to.
We would lobby to have the statewide test, and then if that is removed, we would lobby to still have the option. Yes.
So, I mean, when will we? The state put out some information, I believe, that said. First grade reading in particular is really taking a hit, and math through the elementary and middle schools. Particularly first grade reading, and I think something maybe going down to kindergarten, but that those kids, and it kind of makes sense that without in-person one-on-one support at times, you read to learn, but if you can't read, that comes first. So. Do we need to, have we thought about what would we need to do special, or, can we, I don't know what, but it seems like that's the weak link there. And of course, that's going to affect kids for a long, long time. So it's kind of a cumulative loss. So I think, this testing in particular, and then maybe we need to have some sort of an escalating plan for those that, once we get the assessments, those that are behind really have a catch-up, because there's a limited time that you can really catch up and if you don't, you may be forever behind. So I think this is a critical point as I see it, that we need to assess as soon as we can, inform parents of what it's showing, and particularly identify the students that aren't doing well under the current situation, whatever it is, and then offer a plan. I mean, that's a lot of work, but it seems like that's what kind of the situation calls for at this point. That's our mission. So it's front and center to me. So that would be, I guess, the gist of my comments.
Thank you for that gist. Jesse?
All right, well, I'll go a different route here, but want to give a congratulations out to West High and Waterloo Community Schools alumni Dan Gable for his Medal of Freedom.
Sorry, I should have gone that way.
But anyway, yeah, no, tremendous honor, and just congratulations to him. And I guess I think that was part of
the museum. Yeah.
Yes, one of the gifts here for our students. So a big thank you for them as well.
Okay, I know he took yours, but go ahead, Sue.
Well, I'll add, he was a 1966 graduate of West High School. So, that is a cool thing. He's a product of our system, so, but, right. It was close. Well, I was alive a few years, and he has a quote that I always really attribute to lots of situations. And I think it really attributes to our district as we close out this year of whatever you want to call this year. But he stated that gold medals aren't really made of gold. They're made of sweat, determination, and a hard-to-find alloy called guts. And I just think that's so applicable now, because we've had to dig down and hard into our guts to figure out this pandemic and how to deliver education and how to successfully engage students, and just so I just wanted to commend the district for having lots of guts to gut this out. So
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sue. And I have no report tonight other than to wish everyone blessed and healthy holidays and into the new year. Let's keep that all in perspective. Our next board meeting will be in January 11th. And if seeing that there is no further business to come before the board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Sue. And a second?
Second.
And all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. We are adjourned. Good night. Thank you. Sorry for all the technical issues. Apologize for the length.